The Indigo Disc DLC brought us tons of new Pokemon, but one thing it introduced is something that I think we are not talking enough about. And that is perhaps one of the greatest debates in competitive Pokemon that I've seen in my entire lifetime. That debate being, what is better, Wild Charge or Supercell Slam? Wild Charge is a physical electric move, most commonly seen by the likes of Iron Hands in the current VGC format. It has 90 base power, 100% accuracy, and when you deal damage with this move, you take 1/4 of that damage dealt back to your HP as recoil. In other words, if you deal a little bit of damage, the damage only does a little bit back to you. But if you one-shot an opponent, you're taking 1/4 of that HP dealt back to your HP. For a long time, this was a indisputable better option than something like Thunder Punch that only had 75 base power. However, in the Indigo Disc DLC, we saw for the first time a new move introduced that is learnable by Iron Hands. Another physical electric move, Supercell Slam. With 100 base power and 95% accuracy, surely Supercell Slam is worth the trade. However, if Supercell Slam misses, goes into a Protect, or hits a ground type, the user is hit for 50% of its max HP. This is different than the recoil of Wild Charge, as it doesn't matter how much damage you dealt or would have dealt. You are taking 50% of your own HP regardless. And all it takes is one wrong read or careless decision. So is that extra 10 base power worth potentially losing half of your Pokemon? Or is it better to play it safe? Go for the 90 base power with guaranteed smaller recoil and hope that that's enough to get you through a game. And be okay with the fact that you're not gonna deal as much damage. I took to Pikalytics.com to find out the answer. Here on Pikalytics.com, we're able to look at the usage stats of all Regulation Set F Showdown users. What's being used the most? What sets are they running? What moves do they come with? And the first thing I think it's worth noting is how many ground types really are out there for Supercell Slam to even have to worry about. Currently, the most usage ground type is Landorus Incarnate at 26%. Now, Landorus Incarnate is a scary opponent for Iron Hands to go up against, but is one ground type at 26% enough to scare off Iron Hands' potentially strongest move? Further down, we have the other Landorus Therian, at 8.7% usage, and further down, we do have Ursaluna Blood Moon at 3.5% usage, and regular ol' Hisuian Ursaluna at 2.6%. All in all, not an incredible amount of ground types here in Regulation F. Something incredibly important to look at, however, is it's not just ground types. If the top used Pokemon are running Protect in their top 4 most used moves, chances are they also have a way of stopping Supercell Slam from not only dealing damage to them, but can instead turn the tides and deal tons of recoil back to Iron Hands if the user isn't careful. We see Protect appearing in the top 4 most used moves for Fluttermane, not for Incineroar, not for Rillaboom, not for Urshifu. We see it for Tornadus, we see it for Landorus, we see it for Raging Bolt, Spiky Shield for Ogerpon, Protect for Chien-Pao, not for Archaludon. We see it for Amoonguss. We do not see it for Indeedee. We do not see it for Chi-Yu. We do not see it for Whimsicott. All of these Pokemon have a 10% usage rate or more. So with a little over half of them running Protect, that is cause for concern for those who may want to opt for Supercell Slam. Of course, it is possible for someone like Urshifu Rapid Strike to run Detect, which comes in at just the 5th most run move if you're not opting for that Choice Scarf set. The next thing that's incredibly important to look at is going to be whether or not these moves even matter. We need to calc who the most common enemies are for Iron Hands, and what are the Pokemon that you're going to click an electric move into the most often. How often will it matter if you're dealing 10 less or more damage into these threats? For this calc, we'll be using a max attack Adamant Iron Hands set to see what is the most possible damage that an Iron Hands can deal with both Wild Charge and Supercell Slam. One of the most common things that Iron Hands is set out to deal with is something like an Urshifu Rapid Strike. The most commonly used water type in the past few regulations, Urshifu Rapid Strike can destroy any player if given the opportunity. But as we see here, Iron Hands is able to one-shot an Urshifu Rapid Strike with just 4 EVs in HP investment with both Wild Charge and Supercell Slam. If they're not running a Focus Sash, either move will be able to deal with that Pokemon. Something worth noting, however, if we go back to Urshifu's usage here on Peakalytics, we can actually scroll down and see what the most commonly run sets are. Most of these sets are dealing with very little HP or defense investment. However, if we were to go back and just see what it would be like to run into a bulky Urshifu Rapid Strike with 252 investment in HP, we may see that Wild Charge suddenly only has a 12.5% chance to OHKO, whereas Supercell Slam still has a 75% chance to OHKO. Now, this is an outlier situation as we just saw in the usage stats. So let's take a look at another Pokemon. Now, Fluttermane is not a Pokemon that Iron Hands is going to click an electric move into. More often than not, you're going to have Heavy Slam to deal with Fluttermane. However, seeing as it is the most used Pokemon and has been the most used Pokemon since its introduction, I think it's worth it to take a look. Again, we are using a max attack Adamant Iron Hands, and into a 4 HP investment Fluttermane, we see once again that Wild Charge and Supercell Slam are able to OHKO this Pokemon. Looking back though, if we go to Fluttermane here in the usage stats, we see that its most commonly used spreads are 0 HP investment. Far earlier than Urshifu though, we see that some of the investments do start to differ, with bulkier sets being introduced earlier in its usage history. So it may be worth taking a look. What would it be like to max out Fluttermane's HP? Well, once again, we see that Wild Charge has a 31.3% chance to OHKO, whereas Supercell Slam still has an 87.5% chance to OHKO Fluttermane. Again, it's an outlier situation as most Fluttermanes are running max attack and special attack, at least on the showdown ladder. Another Pokemon that Iron Hands is often set out to deal with is something like a Tornadus. Tornadus being a pure flying type Pokemon, you will be clicking your attacking offensive electric move with your Iron Hands into this Pokemon. And Tornaduses are a little bit more all over the place as far as their spreads are concerned. 9.1% use max speed and max special attack. However, we see bulkier sets like 252 HP, 228 defense, 252 HP, 252 speed, popping up in its usage stats far quicker than the other examples. So with 0 HP investment, we were able to see that both Wild Charge and Super Slam are handily able to OHKO Tornadus. Without a Focus Sash, this Pokemon is going down to either option. If we increase the HP to 252, we see that they both still have a 100% chance to guaranteed OHKO Tornadus. If we buff Tornadus' physical defenses to 228 defense, as was seen in that sample, we see that both Wild Charge and Supercell Slam are pretty much going to OHKO Tornadus most of the time, with Wild Charge only having an 87.5% chance to OHKO, still pretty good, and Supercell Slam still having that 109 to 129% guaranteed OHKO against Tornadus. Now, another Pokemon that may be interesting to take a look at here in our calculations is an Ogerpon Wellspring, something that's able to follow me to draw attacks from Iron Hands, as well as Spiky Shield. Could be a very tricky Pokemon for Iron Hands to have to go up against. Here we are able to see that the most commonly used Ogerpon Wellspring set is actually 252 HP with 148 physical defense. The next most commonly used set is 252 HP with 76 physical defense. And the third most common set is max speed and max attack. In Regulation F, Ogerpons are actually coming across as far bulkier than they have in the past. Now, using that most commonly seen Ogerpon Wellspring spread, we're able to see that Wild Charge is dealing 46 to 55% on average. With rolls, that is a 67.6% chance to 2-hit KO an Ogerpon Wellspring. Supercell Slam, however, if you don't run into a Spiky Shield, is dealing 51 to 61% on average. With or without rolls, this is a guaranteed 2-hit KO against this bulkier Ogerpon Wellspring seen in Regulation F. It may be worth noting what happens when you Terra this Ogerpon. Well, Wild Charge only has a 56.3% chance to OHKO, whereas Supercell Slam has that guaranteed OHKO chance. Finally, it may be worth to take a look at Iron Hands versus Landorus Therian. Landorus Therian is seen far less often than Landorus Incarnate. However, Landorus Incarnate is just point blank a very difficult Pokemon for Iron Hands to deal with, whether it's Wild Charge or Supercell Slam. Guaranteed, you're going to have a hard time against Landorus Incarnate. The reason Landorus Therian is a bit different is because Landorus Therian typically likes to Terra into a pure flying type. The most commonly run Landorus Therian set is going to be Adamant, max attack, and max speed. The second most common is Jolly, max attack and max speed. And then we see something like Naive, max attack and max speed. Assuming we're running into the more common ones, we can see that Landorus Therian, when Terra'd into a flying type, isn't being OHKO'd by either Wild Charge or Supercell Slam, but is being 2-hit KO'd by both. Something we're forgetting here is that, more likely than not, Landorus Therian will have intimidated Iron Hands when it comes in. So at -1 attack, we need to look at the fact that Wild Charge now has a 96% chance to 2-hit KO, whereas Supercell Slam still has that guaranteed 2-hit KO into a Terra Flying Landorus T. This could be incredibly important, as Landorus T typically runs Stomping Tantrum in VGC, and Stomping Tantrum is not able to 1-hit KO Iron Hands, making it more likely that Iron Hands is able to get off at least one attack into a Landorus Therian. The Intimidate brings up an important question, though. What happens if Iron Hands is at -1 when using these moves into even some of these frailer threats? Into a 0 bulk invested Urshifu, we're able to see that Iron Hands into a frail Urshifu at -1 attack, both moves lose their ability to OHKO Urshifu while still maintaining the ability to 2-hit KO Urshifu. At -2, this stays the case. Both moves are still able to 2-hit KO Urshifu, without either having the ability to obviously 1-hit KO Urshifu. For a frail Fluttermane, we see that at -1, both moves again lose their ability to OHKO Fluttermane, whereas at -2, this still stays the same. Both are guaranteed 2-hit KOs, but fail to OHKO Fluttermane. For a frail Tornadus set at -1 attack, we see something similar. This actually hasn't factored into things too much as far as their difference between each other, as Wild Charge and Supercell Slam are still both able to OHKO Tornadus. And for that bulky Ogerpon set, we see that at -1, Wild Charge and Supercell Slam both lose their ability to OHKO this Water Ogerpon when Terra'd, and both lose their ability to 2-hit KO Ogerpon when not Terra'd. For the record, if you were to run into a max speed and max attack Water Ogerpon when not Terra'd, Wild Charge only has a 24% chance to 2-hit KO, whereas Supercell Slam has a 99% chance to 2-hit KO, and when Terra'd, Wild Charge only has a 37% chance to OHKO, whereas Supercell Slam has a 94% chance to OHKO at -1. All in all, what I'm able to deduce here is that Supercell Slam has a better chance at OHKOing some of these threats when they're running a bulkier set. But when they're running their more typical speedy attacking set, at -1 with Intimidate, both moves are evenly neutered. And with no Intimidates and no bulk added, both moves are able to OHKO a lot of these threats just the same. We also haven't talked about the fact that there's a difference between closed team sheet on the ranked ladder, which is typically what I play, versus open team sheet in a competitive format if you were to go to a live event. Now, you may think that open team sheet means that opponents are more able to read when Iron Hands is going for a Supercell Slam and protect, meaning that they can effectively attack Iron Hands while being defensive. Now, that may be true, but it's also the case that trainers using Iron Hands are able to see when an opponent is choice locked or running protect, and they may be able to play around the fact that an opponent is able to or not able to protect, resulting in being able to deal more damage by going for Supercell Slam instead of Wild Charge. What I'm saying is that the individual pilot of a team actually comes into play far more often when comparing these two moves than comparing another pair of moves. Someone who has really good reads may always be able to get off a Supercell Slam and never take any recoil because they're able to know when an opponent is going to be protecting or switching into a ground type, and just not click Supercell Slam on that turn. Team makeup is also incredibly important here, as Iron Hands doesn't mind losing a lot of HP if it's running next to a Sinistcha, or if it's running next to a Pollen Puff user, or if it's running next to a Rillaboom. There's now far more opportunity for Iron Hands to gain HP back, which can also be said of Wild Charge. Perhaps more importantly is that common ground type threats like Landorus are hard threatened by an ice type like Iron Bundle, or something like an Alolan Ninetales. If an opponent sees that you are running one of these Pokemon, or any ice type for that matter, they may be scared into not bringing their Landorus, which opens up Iron Hands' ability to run Supercell Slam over Wild Charge, as it can click it more freely without worrying about a ground type switching in. So yeah, if you have healing support on your team, maybe you're able to offset a potential Supercell Slam miss by having Hospitality or Grassy Terrain, and Drain Punch obviously on Iron Hands' own set. If you're able to run an Ice type, Chen Pao is another good option. Hard threatens Landorus, who is really the only commonly seen ground type at the moment. You also have the opportunity to scare opponents from even bringing their ground types to a matchup at Team Preview, resulting in Iron Hands far more comfortably clicking Supercell Slam throughout the course of a game. As we saw with the Calcs though, does it even matter when Wild Charge and Supercell Slam in so many cases are doing the same exact thing, either guaranteed OHKOing or guaranteed 2-hit KOing, with only outlier situations resulting in Supercell Slam actually doing more than Wild Charge with that 10 BP boost. Better pilots might opt for Supercell Slam, as they're far more confident in their ability to get that move off or not click it if they know what their opponent is doing. However, wiser players may go for the safer option in Wild Charge. You're not going to take that massive recoil by going for a Supercell Slam into a Protect if you're just Wild Charging into that Protect. Before doing any of this research, I am on record as saying that I prefer Supercell Slam over Wild Charge, though looking at this evidence, things may be changing for me. Before I reach my final verdict, I want to remind you to like, comment, and subscribe. I do play on the ranked ladder with new teams every single week, sharing those rental codes for free. If that's your thing, there's no better place to look than right here on the PokeBurm YouTube channel. And now, the time has come. I need to make a decision. For the rest of my life, am I going to use Wild Charge or Supercell Slam? Is Supercell Slam's 10 extra BP tantalizing enough for me to pick it, despite the fact that any bad game on my part could result in losing half of my Iron Hands? Am I to ignore the fact that in Iron Hands' usage stats, Wild Charge is at 85% usage, whereas Supercell Slam is all the way down at 4.8% usage? Does any of this even matter, as Iron Hands itself used to be on 26% of teams in Regulation E and is down all the way to just 9.6% of teams in Regulation F? In the end, I have to look at the facts. I did the research. I need to see the hard evidence and respect that. And I'm not so small a man that my mind can't be changed, even when I'm passionate, one way or the other. And so, when it comes to Wild Charge versus Supercell Slam, my final verdict is that the better move is Supercell Slam. Get good, nerds.